All right, so this is problem 1068, and we're going to talk about variance analysis. And I think this is one of the most underused tools, on the cost side of businesses, especially your small to medium sized businesses. A lot of times, everybody has a budget versus actual report. And so they can look and say, hey, okay, well, our costs are higher than we budgeted here, or they're lower than we budgeted. And so you can kind of look at it, and you can kind of think back and say, oh, okay, well, our costs are higher because we sold more, or you kind of get this high level look at it. But really, there's a lot that goes into a single cost line on the income statement. And it's impacted by a lot of things. How much did you sell? What was the price that you sold it at? What was the price that you bought something at? How much of what did your materials cost? And so variance analysis goes in and it takes basically all of the inputs that are going to flow into that cost number or revenue number or whatever you're looking at. And basically you get to figure out, say, hey, okay, maybe we are over budget in a certain cost category, but maybe it was affected by two different things. Hey, maybe the price of a product was lower than we anticipated, but maybe we used more material. For example, say you're building picnic tables, and say your cost of materials is lower than what you budgeted, and you might look at that and say, hey, that's great. Our cost for this wood for this picnic table was lower than we anticipated. But if you really dig into that number, you might see that, okay, it was lower. Say the number was $10,000. A $10,000 variance in your cost. So you're $10,000 under budget for your wood. When you look at that, it might be because, okay, hey, the price of the wood was lower, and maybe that caused a $13,000 decrease. But maybe you actually used more material than you anticipated, and that cost you an extra $3,000. So when you combine that $13,000 and that $3,000, you get your 10, which is what your budget versus actual shows. And that's good because it shows that you got the product at a lower price, but there's also something bad in there, is that you used more material than you anticipated. And maybe there's some waste or inefficiencies in your processes. So at a high level look, you might look at that and say, hey, we're doing good, and move on. When in reality, there's a problem there, in that there just might be some waste and inefficiencies in how much product or material you're using. And so that's why these variance analyses are so important, because it really digs into the details, to understand, what's going on, and where are we doing good and where are we doing bad, and it doesn't just aggregate all your information. And so, anyway, it's a lot of businesses do use this. Especially the bigger you get, the more sophisticated their costing systems are. But where you kind of see it lacking is in a lot of smaller businesses and small to medium, and it's still really important for them to understand this. So if you can go into a company and provide this kind of analysis, it can be a huge, it can be a very, very impactful tool to give a business. So let's go ahead and look at problem 1068. And so we have a company, we have Saladana, whatever, sports company, and they manufacture soccer balls. And so it gives us some information. So it gives us the standards, which would be, the industry standard, what they expect to use, the budget, however you want to look at it. So basically what they anticipate doing, how much they anticipate paying for materials, how much material they plan on using, the cost of labor, the cost of everything. Basically, the plan is right here. And then they give us some actual numbers on what actually happened. And then we have to go down here and it says basically, hey, find out your direct material cost variance, direct labor variance, and so on and so forth. So we're going to go on and break these down. There's two ways to go about doing this. The book gives a lot of formulas to figure out these numbers. Formulas are great. In fact, on the second tab that you guys have, I have the exact same problem set up with just, kind of simple equations. You can plug in the numbers. So if you like that method, go ahead, feel free to go ahead and use that. I like to take more of a visual approach, so it helps me understand what the numbers, where they're coming from and what they really mean. And so we have that set up here. So we have a little table set up for materials, a little table set up for labor, and a little table set up for overhead. So let's go ahead and start with the materials. And so the first off is we want to know, hey, how many soccer balls did we actually manufacture? And so it says right here that we manufactured 40,000. So let's go ahead and plug that in. And so what this does is we plug in our actual information, so the actual quantity used. We're talking about materials, so actual quantity used, the actual price, and then over on this side we have the standard quantity used and the standard price. And so we're gonna put this together from the perspective of how much material did we plan on using based on our actual sales here of 40,000. So it tells us, let's start over here with the actual quantity. It says that we actually use 13,000 yards of raw materials. So we can plug that in right here. And it also tells us that we paid $205,150 for that material. So that's going to be the total cost right here. So to get in the actual price, we just take our total, divide it by the quantity. And so the actual price we paid for materials was $15.78. All right, so let's jump over here to the other side. And so this is going to be price. This is going to be price per yard. And so if we go over here to standard, so how much should we plan on using? And so it tells us that we planned on using 1/4 of a yard per soccer ball. So 1/4 of a yard, and we did 40,000. So our plan was to buy 10,000. And we take our standard price, and it tells us that we planned on paying $16 per yard. So that means if we do this times this, all right, so we planned on paying $160,000. We actually paid $205,000. Now we have what's called a flexible budget. And so the flexible budget here is what we do is we separate out, so we're looking at what we paid based on the actual quantity that was used. So what we do is we take our actual quantity from over here, and then we take our standard price from over here. We multiply that together. So what that's saying is that, hey, if we would have budgeted based on the 13,000 that we actually used, what's the variance going to be? And so why that's important is that gives us our price variance and our quantity variance. So first of all, let's just skip that. Let's drop down to the total. So the total direct material variance. So our actual cost minus our standard cost. So what we have is we paid $45,000 more in materials than we expected to do it. However, that's good information, but it's not the best information, because that's a combination of the price being not what we planned and the quantity being not what we planned. So what we want to do is we want to separate this $45,000 between the price variance and the quantity variance. So the price variance is just going to be this 205 minus the 208. And so, because we use the exact same quantity number, 13,000 in each, but we just use a different price. And so that means that, hey, out of that 45,150, hey, we actually got a better deal than we anticipated, because we actually paid $1,578 when we planned on paying $1,600. And then the rest of it is the 208 minus the 160 is 48,000. And so what that's saying is that, hey, we paid $48,000 more because we used more material than we anticipated. So there might be some waste there, but it's partially offset because we also got a better price for it. So I did a little table over here. So in the book, it's asking us for A through I. So I just put A through I over here, and then we just linked up the cells. So this actually answers part A, D, and E. And then also over here, we have a U for an unfavorable cost variance, which means we paid more than we wanted to. Or we have an F for favorable. So that's, we actually paid less than we anticipated to. All right, so let's go down to the labor portion. And so for the labor portion, so it says that we paid 8,240 direct labor hours at $9.50. So we can plug that in. So actual hours and then the actual price. So our actual labor cost was $78,375. That's not right, because that says $240, not $250. There we go. And so let's jump over here to the standard side. And so we planned on the hours planned. So that's going to be right here. So see the hours per ball, which is 0.2, multiplied times the number of balls that we actually manufactured. So we planned on having 8,000 hours. And it says that the wage we anticipated paying was $10. So plug that here, multiply those together. Now we can carry over our numbers for our flexible budget. So to get our price variance, we just subtract the actual minus our flexible budget. And for our quantity variance, we take our flexible budget minus our standard. And so to get the total direct labor variance, you can do it two ways. Up here, we took the total minus the standard. And so, or we can do it the same way as taking our price variance plus our quantity variance. And so it's the exact same thing. So for labor, we planned on doing 80,000. We actually did 78,000. Part of it was that because we actually had a lower price per hour, and so that accounted for $4,120 less. But we also had more hours than we anticipated doing, which caused $2,400 of cost. And so the net variance for labor is going to be 1,720, which that is going to be a positive, sorry, it's a negative number, which means we paid less, so that's going to be a favorable variance. All right, then for overhead, so same idea. And so it tells us that overhead up here is so variable support cost rate $15 per direct labor hour. So the driver, like we talked about before in ABC costing, is direct labor hours. And it tells us that the total variable cost versus variable support cost was $131,840. So if we take our total cost divided by our driver, we get $16 for overhead rate. And so our standard, that's going to be our 0.2, so 2 hours per ball. So we planned on having 8,000, so that's, this is going to be the same as our direct labor up here. And it says that the variable support cost rate was $15 per direct labor hour. Let's go ahead and plug the numbers in for our flexible budget. So we anticipated overhead of 120,000. We actually had 131,000. So the total variance, we'll go down here. So the total variance is going to be 11,840, and that's going to be separated between the price variance of 8240, because we planned on paying 15, we actually paid 16, and then our quantity variance, which is 3,600. So we actually had more hours. So overhead, we actually had more hours and a higher price, which made up a total of 11,840. So this way, anyway, variance analysis, it's a really, really handy tool, very practical tool, in understanding, hey, why did we, do good or do bad in a certain income statement or cost line item. This really breaks it down so we understand what is really causing that difference. So, really, really great tool to use. Like I said, you can do it, take either the visual approach, which is my preference, or you can also, if you just get the formulas down, you can plug in those formulas. And so I gave those to you guys on your worksheet over here, and I kind of plugged in most of the numbers where they're coming from. So whichever way your brain works, go for it.